Hello, my name is Jay and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing our first ever tutorial in Planet Zoo. This video is going to cover the basics of rock work, and as we go along you're going to be learning the different types of rock that we have in the game and their different uses. And by the end of today's video you should be able to create some really effective rock formations such as this and use the rocks in really interesting ways within your habitats. Here we have all the different rock types that are available to you within Planet Zoo. These of course differ by biome, just in terms of texture and appearance, and in this video we're just going to be sticking to the temperate biome. Here I have broken down these rocks by number. Within the game they're all labelled as rocks 1 onwards, and here you have your main rocks, which are rock 1 to 18. These are going to be the important ones that we're going to be focusing on. These are absolutely key to making effective rock formations, and we're going to be going through these as we go along. Next we also have the cladding rocks and pillar rocks. These are also really important but are more useful in specific situations. Here you can see that I have grouped our rocks into 6 main groups. Firstly, you have our base rocks, which are going to be the main body of your workflow. Next, we have flat rocks, which are really great when you need flat, traversable surfaces. We then have miscellaneous rocks, which are the general odd-shaped boulders which can be used very freely and very flexibly. We then have small rocks, which are exactly what it sounds like, your smaller rocks. And finally, your cladding and pillars. Your base rocks are rocks 1 to 3. These are going to be the body of any rock formation you make. They're kind of the main course, where everything else is kind of built around this. They're essentially 3 different sizes of the same type of rock, and you can use these to build up your initial structure for almost any type of rock formation and bulk out any areas that need a little bit more rock work. Anything that needs a lot of body, a lot of weight, you can use these main rocks to build them up. They also work really well for building up height for taller rock formations and structures, and pushing many of these rocks together is a really great way to get started with any sort of rock formation. Rocks 4 to 7 are your flat rocks. These are extremely useful for a variety of situations. As they're flat, you can use them in habitats for animals to traverse, and you can even make slopes with them onto hills or even into water. Rock 4 is actually my personal favourite rock and is by far the single most versatile rock you can think of. It has multiple different edges with different textures. For example, on one long edge you have angled sharp surfaces, and the other edge you have kind of a bumpy and beveled edge which is perfect for slopes. Rock 7 is absolutely perfect for slopes in general, as it is quite a nice gradual gradient from a lower end to a higher end, and most animals are able to traverse this incline. Your miscellaneous boulders are rocks 8 to 13. There isn't too much to say about these, but they essentially act as filler rocks. They are super versatile, they have a lot of different shapes and texture to them, and they can be added to any formation, waterfall, habitat or river to add a bit more texture and interest to your rock formations. Some of them have sharp edges, some of them have blunt edges. For example, rock 8 has a thin sharp edge near the top, which is perfect for adding to borders, fences or cliff sides. Moving on to rocks 14 to 18, these are our small rocks. They are all generally less than a meter tall, and they are perfect for using in rivers, for gardening, and they are also the best rocks to be used indoors if you're having any indoor plant spaces. Alongside adding interest to bigger rocks and kind of creating the illusions of natural rock falls, you can also use these rocks to fill in odd gaps, add next to buildings, and if you use them together in a large setting you can actually create quite convincing riverbeds or landslides. Moving on to our cladding rocks, these are perfect for creating shelters and large flat rock sheets. They can be used to create bridges and paths across habitats, crevasses and rivers. Another excellent use for them is to sink them deep into the ground to create irregular rocks that kind of peek through the surface, which can be blended then with the rock paint texture to create seamless rocky surfaces, which can be traversed easily by animals. Now that covers all our different rock types except for pillars, which we will cover in a separate video sometime in the future, because they're more effective in very specific circumstances, such as creating borders or supporting cladding. In this final video, we will combine all the different rock types that we've covered so far, and we're going to use all the different shapes, structures and textures to build up an interesting rock formation. We're going to start with our base rocks, and we're going to place them in sort of a pyramid structure, with the biggest rock, rock 1, forming the center, and we're going to start extending outwards in a sort of pyramid fashion with rocks 2 and 3, and the further out we go, we're going to sink the rocks lower into the ground, with a few exceptions here and there to add some irregularity. But by the end of this, you should be able to kind of produce a general skeleton for what your rock formation is going to look like. It doesn't have to be a perfect shape. That's the whole point of rocks, is that they're quite imperfect and irregular, and that honestly adds to the effect. So there's not really any wrong or right way to do this, as long as you kind of keep an idea of where rocks would form naturally and where they would fall. When the base form is in, we can then move on to our flat rocks to extend the base and gradually create a tiered appearance towards the top of the structure. Making use of rock 4's bumpy edge, we can create a bit more of a blended gradual tier from the ground into the rocks. So we're going to blend the rocks into each other and into the ground so that it looks a lot more seamless. Rock 5 and 6 can add a bit of smoothness to the surface, and finally we can use rock number 7 to add some really clean slopes. And as we do this, we can rotate that particular rock to kind of create some wider slopes. So if animals were wanting to access different tiers of this, they can do so via these slopes. Our miscellaneous rocks come in next, and we can use these to just add a bit more interest across this formation. Wherever it looks a little bit less interesting, we can just plop in a boulder or two, and we don't have to be as concerned with the general formation, as these are kind of the odd boulders, the ones that protrude here and there and just add a little bit more interest to the formation as a whole. Small rocks come next, and we're going to just dot these all across the formation, but we're going to increase in number as we get towards the outer edges. This kind of again builds up this idea of rocks tumbling from the top and kind of landing closer to the outside edges over time, and kind of just establishing themselves there as soil and stuff gets built up around it and they get stuck. Now finally, after we're done with the small rocks, we can finally use our cladding pieces across the outer edge of the formation, sinking them just low enough into the ground to give us these irregular transitionary pieces, which we can then blend into the ground using the rock paint texture. This is really the part that makes it kind of stand out, as you can use this rock texture to make it look like it's naturally emerging from this ground, but with the addition of a bit more soil texture, a bit of sand texture, you can make it look like a very interesting kind of landform. And now that we're done with the rocks, we add some last touches. We can use foliage. Foliage is what really takes any build, regardless of whether we're talking about rocks or buildings. Foliage really takes everything to the next level. Plants are often found growing in the cracks between rocks, so find areas which look like spots where water would collect in your rock formation and add in the appropriate plants. This depends so much on your biome, so if you're doing a desert build, for example, you may add some cacti. If you're doing a tundra build, for example, you might add some diamond leaf willow. But here, as we're building in a temperate biome, I would suggest bracken, as bracken ferns are often found in little crevices as they grow through kind of little cracks in rocks and similar things like that. For final measure, I'm going to add a couple trees and a fallen dead tree just across the rocks. And we're done! This is my first tutorial for you guys. I do hope that you've learned a lot from it. If you have learned something, or if you have any comments for future ideas, or if you have any critique or feedback, please do let me know in the comments. And if it has helped, please do leave a like, subscribe for more similar content, and I will see you in the next video where we're going to be covering some more advanced rock techniques. That may come out either this week or next week, depending on my schedule. But in any case, thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.